The story of Deliver Us from Evil started with Jerry Bruckheimer purchasing the rights to a book called Beware the Night by Ralph Sarchie, who's a South Bronx police sergeant, or was for 7 or 8 years. And in the book, he talks about his experiences both as a cop in one of the most dangerous districts of crime in the country, but also his gradual involvement in investigating cases of the paranormal. And those investigations eventually led him to becoming an assistant to an exorcist. True story. There's a real difference between the scariness of an exorcism film and the scariness of any other kind of horror film. Slasher movies are scary because there are real killers in the world. We have an innate fear of that. I understand that. Most monster movies are based on things that are completely fictitious. There are no such thing as real vampires. There are no werewolves. Most monster movies are based on things that are not real phenomenon. Exorcisms are real. You know, they happen. They happen often. And no matter what you think about them, they're fascinating. They're frightening. I've read a lot of documentation of cases and seen videotape of a lot of cases, and they're incredibly disturbing and they're incredibly compelling. And so I think that there's an inherent interest and fascination in the connection that these kinds of films have to a real phenomenon in the world, and you have to reckon with what's behind it. And I'm not really interested in trying to propagate, you know, people's belief in the reality of demons or not, but I do think that the phenomenon of exorcism is something that people need to take seriously because it's a real thing in the world and it changes people's lives when it happens. Deliver Us from Evil is the story of Ralph Sarchie, a South Bronx police sergeant, an undercover cop who investigates real crime in the streets of New York based on a real guy. And through a series of particular cases, he began to discover paranormal activity in the Bronx. And because of that, he became connected to a priest by the name of Father Mendoza, who started to help him understand the nature of the phenomenon that he was dealing with. And that process led them to the pursuit of a single individual who's demon-possessed. And the pursuit of that individual creates all kinds of mayhem and excitement and ultimately scariness, and leads to a big conclusion at the end where the two of them really have to pair up both of their skill sets in order to conquer the evil that they've encountered. The movie captures what happened to Ralph Sarchie in his movement from being a lapsed Catholic and a complete skeptic about the paranormal, about evil, about the demonic. And he was so well trained in combating the evil of the streets. He knew the streets well. He was an undercover cop in an area the FBI called the most dangerous square mile in America, which was the 4-6 precinct in the South Bronx. And yet, he began to encounter things that were inexplicable to him. And he began to participate in these cases and investigations that definitely went outside anything he'd experienced before. And so he began to lose his skepticism and ultimately had to surrender to the idea that possession is a real phenomenon, and he began to work with this priest and has continued that work up to today. There's a couple of action scenes in Deliver Us from Evil. You know, the opening scene is a battle scene in Iraq, and then there's when they chase Jimmy down at his apartment, the first character who's demon possessed that you encounter in the movie. That's an action scene when they chase him in the rain. These bursts of action that occur through the movie were always part of what I wanted the movie to give to an audience, which is all the things you love out of a good popcorn movie. You know, it's scary, it's exciting, it's got action, it's got thrills, it's got drama, and it's got police procedural, and there's a little bit of the kitchen sink mentality that I always had about the movie that I thought the story invited. I thought the story really invited everything you love from a good cop movie, which certainly includes action, and everything you want from a good scary movie, you know, which includes the demonic and the supernatural and possessions and exorcisms and all of that. If I could get all of that in without shortchanging any of it, that it would work. And I think that in terms of the action, I think that culminates in 2 scenes both involving exorcism, because the exorcism scenes are really action scenes in this movie. The first one being in the basement of the building when Mendoza first encounters Jimmy and begins an exorcism ritual on him. Meanwhile, Butler, Joel McHale's character, is in about a 4-minute knife fight with a possessed guy, Santino, and I just think that's just the stuff of good movie watching, you know.